The Battle of Jaffa was an engagement fought during the Southern Palestine Offensive of the Sinai and Palestine Campaign in World War I, between the Egyptian Expeditionary Force of the British Empire on one side and the Yildirim Army Group of the Ottoman Empire and German Empires on the other. The port of Jaffa had been occupied by the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade on the 16th of November, as a result of the victory gained by the brigade and the 1st Light Horse Brigade at the Ayun Kara 2 days before. But the Ottoman forces were only 3 miles away across the Auju River, the mouth of which is known as the Nahr-el-Auja. The closeness of the Ottoman army made the port and town unusable to shipping, still being within range of Ottoman artillery. Over the night of the 2021 December 1917, the 52nd Division carried out an assault river crossing, with the far side of the river taken. The other divisions of the 21st Corps with the supporting artillery crossed and forced the Ottoman defenders to withdraw 5 miles. With the Ottoman forces pushed back, Jaffa and communications between it and Jerusalem were made secure. The night crossing of the river has been regarded as one of the most remarkable feats of the Palestine Campaign. Background: on the 16th of November 1917, the British forces occupied the port of Jaffa on the Mediterranean coast. However, the Ottoman forces forced out of the town were still able to interdict shipping and harass troop movements from the positions on the northern bank of the Ayun River, the Nahr-el-Auja as it was called in Arabic. The British Commander General Edmund Allenby needed to establish a defensive line running from the Mediterranean Sea which could be held with reasonable security once his right flank was secured on the Dead Sea. In order to consolidate a strong British line, it was necessary to push the 3rd and 7th Divisions, part of the 22nd Corps, of the Ottoman 8th Army away from the Nahr-el-Auja 4 miles north of Jaffa on the Mediterranean coast. The river was defended on the northern bank by a trench system from Mullebus and Fethia to Bald Hill. From Mullebus to the sea, the river is between 40 to 50 feet wide and 10 feet deep except for the ford. The first attack across the Nahr-el-Auja was little more than a raid, on the night of 25th November by 2 infantry battalions from the 54th Division and the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade. The outnumbered battalions were driven back by the Ottoman defenders as they recaptured the bridgeheads and restored the tactical situation. British attack. Build-up. 3 infantry divisions of the British 21st Corps, under the command of Lieutenant General Edward Bulfine, began moving the units into position on the coastal plain on the 7th of December. The 75th Division was on the right with the 54th Division in the center and the 52nd Division on the left at the coast. The 162nd Brigade relieved the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade in the front line on the 11th of December, and the mounted riflemen, who had been heavily involved in the earlier attempt to capture the Nahr-el-Auja, moved back to bivouac near Ayun Kara. On the 14th of December, Major General John Hill, the commanding officer of the Lowland Division, submitted a plan for a surprise assault across the river by his division. Artillery was concentrated behind the lines, while the division's Royal Engineers formed pontoons and canvas coracle boats that were large enough to accommodate 20 men. It had initially been planned for a heavy artillery bombardment to precede the attack. However, Hill suggested they instead try a surprise attack without the artillery bombardment. Then, in the days preceding the attack, the artillery batteries conducted several engagements, mostly to suppress Ottoman patrol activity and register the guns on targets, in case they were needed in the coming assault. Over the night of 18-19 December, the 161st Brigade from the 54th Division and the Auckland and Wellington Mounted Rifles Regiments, for the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade, moved into the front line, replacing the 52nd Division, to cover the gap in the line left by the redeployment of the 161st Brigade. The 75th Division extended its front westwards to include Ludd. The preparations for the attack were hindered by the sodden state of the low and swampy ground on the southern banks of the Nahr-el-Auja, where the attack would be launched, made worse by 3 days of rain. Assault over the night of 21 December. In heavy rain, the division carried out an assault river crossing, using pontoon bridges and boats. The 155th Brigade crossed the river east of Jericho, and then turned right, attacking the Turkish position. The 156th Brigade and the 157th Brigade both crossed the river west of Jericho. The first unit to cross about 1 mile from the river mouth was a company of the 7th Battalion, Cameronians, of the 156th Brigade. Several of the flimsy boats collapsed, and the men were forced to wade across the chest-deep river. Once across, they established a bridgehead on the Ottoman bank of the river. When they were secure, the engineers started building a pontoon bridge for the main force to cross. By 2300, almost 3 of the division's battalions had crossed the river. The 8th Battalion, Cameronians, and the 4th Battalion, Royal Scots, for the 156th Brigade and the 7th Battalion, Highland Light Infantry from the 157th Brigade. By midnight, all the 156th Brigade had crossed over, attacked the Ottoman position on a hill at Sheikh Muyanis, which overlooked the river and all the other positions in the area. The rest of the 157th Brigade were not as fortunate when they were crossing the river, being targeted by an Ottoman artillery barrage. However, by 1:32 other battalions, the 6th Highland Light Infantry and the 5th Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, had crossed the river and secured the high ground overlooking the crossing point by 3:30. The 157th also secured the northern bank of a ford to assist the crossing. The 155th Brigade mounted 2 distraction attacks to cover the real attempt by the 5th Battalion, King's Own Scottish Borderers, who, using rafts, crossed the river. By dawn, the whole brigade had crossed the river and secured the heights at Kirbe Hadra. The whole division had crossed the river in darkness, and all Ottoman resistance was overcome by British troops using the bayonets, and no shots were fired. The attack completely surprised the Ottoman defenders, and the front line were forced back 5 miles. By dawn, the British held a line from Hadra to Tel el-Rekate, around 2 miles north of the river. It had been intended for the Anzac Mounted Division to cross over and pursue the retreating Ottomans. However, the rainfall over the preceding days and the damp boggy ground prevented them from following the retreating Ottoman survivors, who were escaped unhindered. With the northern riverbank in British hands, the engineers constructed bridges to allow their artillery to cross the river. The next day, the 22nd of December, the British position was made even more secure when the 54th Division captured Bald Hill to the right of the 52nd. In doing so, the Ottoman defenders lost 52 killed and 44 more were taken prisoner. By dawn, the 54th Division had advanced further north, occupying Mulebus and Fefia. Later in the day, they also captured Rantia. The 52nd Division continued the advance on the left, supported by naval gunfire from a Royal Navy flotilla, 3 destroyers Grafton, Lapwing and Lizard, and 3 monitors M29, M30 and M32. By the end of the day they had secured Tel el-Mahmud, Wadi Ishkar and the Ayun Sheikh el-Balut Asaf, on the cliffs above the sea 8 miles north of Jaffa. During the Battle of Jaffa, the attacks by the 2 British divisions had forced the Ottoman forces back 5 miles. Aftermath. The battle was a success for the British, with 316 Ottoman prisoners taken and 10 machine guns captured. The battle was mentioned in General Sir Edmund Allenby's dispatch. The successful crossing of the Nahr-el-Auja reflects great credit on the 52nd Division. It involved considerable preparation, the details of which were thought out with care and precision. The sodden state of the ground, and, on the night of the crossing, the swollen state of the river, added to the difficulties. Yet by dawn the whole of the infantry had crossed. The fact that the enemy were taken by surprise, and that all resistance was overcome with the bayonet without a shot being fired, bears testimony to the discipline of this division. The operation, by increasing the distance between the enemy and Jaffa from 3 to 8 miles, rendered Jaffa and its harbour secure, and gained elbow room for the troops covering Lud and Ramla and the main Jaffa-Jerusalem road. The British official history described the battle. The passage of the Auju has always been regarded as one of the most remarkable feats of the Palestine Campaign. Its chief merits were its boldness, justifiable against troops known to be sluggish and slack in outpost work and already shaken by defeat, its planning, the skill of the engineers, the promptitude with which unexpected difficulties in the bridging the river were met, finally, the combined discipline and dash of the infantry which carried out the operation without a shot being fired and won the works on the right with the bayonet. This was one of the last actions the 52nd Division fought in this campaign. In March 1918, they were ordered to move to the Western Front in France. The 54th Division remained in Palestine, taking part in operations at Berukan in April 1918 and the Battle of Sharon in September. The British units involved in the battle were awarded the Distinct Battle Honour Jaffa.